Well, hi, this is John Sarver. Welcome to the GLREA Thursday evening Zoom sessions. And we are changing our kind of format a little. So starting in June, the first Thursday of the month will be Ann Arbor Solar Stories that are hosted by Julie Roth of the City of Ann Arbor. The second Thursday will continue the Clean Energy Seminars, which are hosted by our Vice President of GLREA, Mark Clevey. The third Thursday will be Detroit Solar Stories, hosted by another board member, Diane Van Buren. And the fourth Thursday, I'll be back as your host, is with either a My Solar Story or an energy Q&A kind of open discussion. I'd like to thank the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy for sponsoring the whole series. We really appreciate that. And, I have to put in a commercial here, so I'd have to encourage any of you who might not belong to GLREA to consider joining. You can join online at www.glrea.org. And tonight, I think we're going to have a really interesting presentation by Dan Henderson, from a solar consultant with Michigan Solar Solutions. He's going to talk about a lot of interesting topics, including microinverters and batteries, monitoring, battery sizing tool, and state-of-the-art solar design tools. A lot of you will be interested in with that. And so with that, Dan, you have the floor.
Excellent. Excellent, John. I appreciate the introduction. And more importantly, I appreciate the opportunity to present here this evening. I really appreciate it. And to all of the attendees taking time out of your day to meet with us here and hear what I have to say. So first off is you will see my contact information is displayed on the screen here. I welcome each and every one of you to jot that down. If throughout this Zoom meeting here this evening, if I skip over anything and it becomes unanswered and we're not able to address it in the question and answers, or perhaps you'd simply like to see some spec or data sheets on the equipment, feel free to drop me a line or give me a call. We'd be happy to discuss that. So as John had mentioned, we're going to look at a number of different items today here. And first focusing on is the Enphase system. We will talk a little bit about their microinverter solution and how that relates to your typical string or single phase inverter. So we'll talk about how that compares. We will look at the Enphase Encharge battery solution and talk about how that comes into play in today's market. And most importantly, how is it different from the other battery manufacturers and their products on the market here today. We will talk about the monitoring capabilities, and being that Enphase makes the microinverters and the battery, we'll talk about the monitoring platform and how it's all brought into one singleized location. And more importantly, you've got one manufacturer for warranty claims and such. So it's really nice to keep that all in-house. We will review the battery sizing tool that Enphase has on their website. It's also something I recommend everybody go on and take a look at. And then we'll talk about the state-of-the-art design tools that we have at our disposal these days, especially with being that we are in a COVID world and we're looking at more remote business. We will talk about how we can take that kitchen table experience and we can make that a virtual experience. So first off, as I mentioned, we're going to discuss Enphase here this evening. Enphase was founded in 2006. They were founded in a response to seeing some areas that could be improved with some of the inverter solutions, with the string inverters and shading, bringing down the entire string of production. So they saw this as a response and were founded in 2006, based in Fremont, California, and they are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. If anybody here is watching them, I promise the stock is going to do better. It has taken a little bit of a dip. Maybe it's now a time to buy. Great company. They've got some pretty impressive products, and we'll talk about how they're tried, they're tested, and they're proven in today's market. So first off is the microinverter solution. This was, Enphase's, claim to fame here in the respect of having the redundancy of this system built in. With a typical single phase inverter, you have that, whether it's Solar Edge or whatever manufacturer, typically it's going to be mounted on the exterior of the home. And with that is you have one centralized location that is doing that DC to AC conversion. In other words, one location only, which can result in a single point of failure. With that being said, the microinverter solution allows a per module inverter. So a microinverter placed at every single module, whether it's on the ground or on the home, with the idea is we've built this redundancy in the system. If one microinverter were to fail, that would be one panel or one module that would be down and no longer producing. The rest of the system would still be operating independently as they are an individual per panel basis. So you run into having that redundancy, that peace of mind that if it does go down, I'm down one module, which, don't get me wrong, we want to course correct, but it's much better than having the entire system down and you can't touch the DC power that your solar array is trying to produce. Another advantage over the microinverter solution is it has this, what they've labeled and called it as burst mode. And essentially what this is being able to combat those low lighting conditions. Cloud coverage, overcast day, or how about the early morning sun, the late in the evening as the sun's setting in the sky. This has been, tasked with having this burst mode to be produce more in those settings. So you could see up to 15 minutes early in the morning, this microinverter could turn on and start producing, and it could last up to 15 minutes longer in the evening producing electricity. So it's got this burst mode that's pretty impressive. And then the distributed architecture. This is something that I really think can go underappreciated from the respect of this allows you to do expandability or scalability with your system. Some customers maybe want to start at 75 to an 80% annual electricity offset with the option to be able to go bigger down the line. If you want to add to your system, it's a matter of additional modules and additional microinverters. A single phase inverter solution is going to keep that DC to AC ratio. So once we hit a certain number of modules, we're in the position of, do we need to upgrade that inverter, or are we going to start to deal with the clipping that takes place in that single phase inverter? So this again has that distributed architecture designed for scalability. So we see a lot of customers want to add down the road as, especially with the demand of electric vehicles coming into play, we are starting to see more and more customers, their consumption increase, and maybe looking for small panel additions to that existing installation. Tried, tested, and proven. This is one slide I really like to discuss because Enphase, they're relatively new to the market since 2006, but it's pretty impressive what they've built in such a short time. They have over 1 million hours of testing for each model. They have 8 generations of products, IQ7 Plus, A, etc. They've had over 32 million microinverters shipped worldwide and installed in over 1.4 million homes. They have an excellent track record. I believe their failure rate is somewhere of 1 in every 3,000 shipped have a defect. So it's a very, very, very low rates there. They go through 8 million hours of testing every year and 300 issued patents. Again, this is a very impressive product. They've actually achieved a NEMA 6 category, which is, allows them to have these equipment in all over the world. A NEMA 6 category, the testing for that is that the microinverter has to be submerged under 1 meter of water and operational for 24 hours. I believe they took it a step further in it was days that they actually were running these microinverters and passed these tests. So they are warranted for 25 years, which is typically what we see with the solar modules that come with the installation. So they have a nice warranty to go right along with those modules. And I also like the fact that it is a 25-year. They're quite confident in their products and their manufacturing capabilities. The Encharge solution. So we have these microinverters, we've got the redundancy built in and this distributed architecture. They've taken this a step further and they've incorporated and rolled out with a battery solution. And what I really like about this is it's budget friendly. More often than not, you will see most battery suppliers, Tesla, for example, it's a 13.5 kilowatt hour storage battery. If you would like to add to your battery bank, you go an addition of 13.5 kilowatt hours. The Encharge battery system, you have an Encharge 3, which is it's about a 3.3 kilowatt storage solution. And then you have the Encharge 10, excuse me. Here's what's really cool about their battery system. Like the microinverters, they had redundancy built in. So the Encharge 3 actually comes equipped with 4 microinverters. The idea here is that if we had a microinverter solution fail on the battery, we still have 3 other microinverters that are converting that energy off of the battery. The only difference you're going to see is the rate at which you can draw off that battery is going to drop some. Other battery manufacturers with the one single inverter housed in that battery, if that does go down, you are unable to draw any off of that battery until you have that inverter replaced. So it's a really nice, like I said, it's designed to be for the scalability, just like the microinverters and adding to your system. It comes equipped with smart profiles. We know that there's going to be different cases and different users. So it does give you a variety of options. I like the full backup mode, store 100% of your battery energy for use during a grid outage. It can kind of design for long-term sustained grid outages. It kind of becomes its own little microgrid of power in the event of the grid's down or it's without specs, and a typical solar array would go down at that point for safety purposes. We don't want to push power out to a grid that's not operational. So I really like this piece. They also have a storm guard integrated with this. So if we know that a storm's coming and we anticipate some bad weather, we can actually turn this on, and it's going to set us in a mode to be more of like that self-consumption or full backup mode. And it also will turn off of that storm guard mode once the storm has passed. So it's very interesting how this all fits together. As we talked about, it's modular and it is expandable. So we have an Encharge 10 here, again, with the 12 microinverters inside. And then to the right, you will see that we have 2 Encharge 3. So they've had about 16 or so kilowatt hours of storage. So again, stackable and most certainly expandable. Let's see here. As I mentioned, there's redundancy built into this platform. It's got 12 microinverters on the Encharge 10. The Encharge 3 has 4 microinverters. So again, we're eliminating that single point of failure within this battery. Here's an interesting one, that this is actually going to incorporate a lithium iron phosphate as its battery chemistry. And with that, as a result, there's no active cooling required. The cool air will actually come in from the bottom, and then the warm air is going to rise out of the top. So it has that active or passive cooling. It doesn't require any fans or active cooling. And ultimately, the end result is it's a much safer battery solution for you and your family. A lot of others are like lithium, nickel, magnesium, cobalt, and those do require active cooling. And we run the risk of, if they were to overheat or get punctured, that we could have combustion, thermal runaway. We have a lot of these concerns have been removed with these with the battery chemistry that the Encharge is utilizing currently. Let's see here, generator integration. And this is pretty impressive with what Enphase has done in this front. It has advanced generator integration. It actually allows the system actually allows the generator to run parallel with the solar and the battery backup solution. So you could power larger loads, especially when we get into wanting to back up air conditioning items with a large draw. What we also have to take into consideration is the initial inrush flow of electricity from this equipment can sometimes be 6 to 8 times greater than its operating voltage. So we need to take that into account when we size these batteries, that surge doesn't draw out your battery or drain the battery down. So this can actually work in conjunction with it. It's taken a step further too, once again, with the generator integration. Most battery manufacturers, when the battery dies, it kicks the generator on, and that generator would run until the grid has come back up. The generator integration with the Enphase and Encharge system, it would kick on the battery, or the generator, charge the battery up, and then it would shut the generator off. So you don't have that natural gas, that bill starting to rack up on the background there. Very, very interesting how the system all kind of comes together. Strong warranty for a battery. It's got a 10-year warranty, 4,000 discharge cycles. I see most battery manufacturers typically around 5 years. So to me, that speaks volumes to their confidence in the product, the life expectancy. So again, it's always good to have some confidence in your products. Now, we talked about the integration of the the microinverters and the in-charge battery system, and there's a monitoring platform. And the monitoring platform is quite unique in the respect that it's going to give you access to see at a modular level, how are your panels performing? You will see on the computer screen in this example, some of the panels in the middle row appear to be darker, and they're showing about 66 to 65 or so like watt hours produced or watts produced. This is just showing you at a quick glance that, hey, because they're darker, we have seen less production out of this panel. It very well could be shading, it can vary from module to module, but what we want to keep an eye on is that we're not seeing large discrepancies here where we may have a panel that is starting to fail. So it gives you that back end look to see how's the system performing. And with that, the same platform, you're going to have access to your battery. You can see this, how much storage is left there, if you're drawing or what you're charging the battery with. You can customize the modes, for the off-grid solution or the storm guard. You can set it for that. So it's very customizable, very user-friendly with their user interface on their monitoring platform. But again, I like that it's in one location, one monitoring platform, one manufacturer, and most importantly, one warranty, or one manufacturer to deal with from a warranty standpoint. Let's see here. So the battery sizing tool, and this is actually housed on the Enphase website. If you visit Enphase, there is on the right-hand side, it says Design My System. And for this example, I actually took a customer that I was actually building this out with them. You enter their zip code, and you give an idea of your average monthly electric bill to kind of give you some rough calculations. And it will recommend a solar array system size, but more importantly, if you see down towards the middle of the screen, a 13.4 kilowatt hour battery solution is recommended for the size of the installation. And what we're doing here is we're just simply going through with the customer and just verifying what would you like to see in a battery backup solution, because as I mentioned with the equipment and the inrush flow of electricity, we need to make sure we're properly sizing the batteries out. And we find it's best if we can have conversation and agree upon what would be going on that battery, so expectations are well in line there. This, for example, is showing the essential appliances, lights, refrigerator, your laptop, Wi-Fi router. None of these really large draw or heavy equipment. That is going to be on the more of the larger appliances. These essentials are going to be more for like your N-Charge 10 or your N-Charge 10 and a 3. When we get into more of the larger appliances, well pumps, air conditioning, things of that nature, we run into where we have that inrush flow of electricity. We need to start kind of properly planning and sizing. So you will see we have a number of equipment and what is going to be backed up or not. So you can download this and keep it for your records, and it will have some detailed information. I don't have a live screen here. If I hit expand, it would let me know based on your system and the equipment, you would be able to on this battery run for 12 hours. And it will actually give you some of those calculations up front. So you'll have an idea and again, realistic expectations as to what the battery is going to do for you. So let's see here. All right, now the fun begins. Like I said, we're in a day and age of we're dealing a lot more remotely than we were in the past. And as much as I've always enjoyed the kitchen, sitting at the kitchen table, we do have the ability to take it remotely. Hopefully with the vaccination starting to circulate around, and we can start to see these numbers fall, and we can try to get back to some semblance of normalcy. But in the meantime, we do have some very interesting tools. First of which is a software it's called Aurora, and it allows us to model out solar arrays. And as you can see here, we can model out new and existing homes or structures. So the example towards the bottom of the screen is an outbuilding that a customer wanted to have us put solar panels on. The example above is a new build. I actually took the engineered drawings or the blueprints and found measurements that we could use to scale this up, and then we generate a 3D rendering, and now we can accurately forecast what's possible on the home, what size system can we fit, and we can start to incorporate a lot of that information in. So it's really cool what we can do. The 3D modeling is also, it's very fun to show. I'm a little bit of a solar nerd here. I love to get in my hands and play with it, but it's really cool what we can do with that technology. When it comes to shading, this is a concern for any individual who has a solar array or is looking at going solar. It's, you know, it's our worst enemy. What we're going to show you is why customers are very comfortable with the high level of accuracy in the software. And we use a lot of different tools integrated in here from, we'll talk about LiDAR, weather mapping, different things of that nature that we kind of incorporate to come up with this accurate analysis that we're usually about a 98% accurate on these analysis. Depending on a site survey, typically it's you know, maybe an electrical system upgrade. But let me show you, this is a GIF that I actually had created. This is an array that I actually had built out. You can see the 3D modeling here. And what I'm doing is I've incorporated trees. Not that there's a lot of trees to the south of the home, but it's good to show the visuals. You can see where modeling is the sun is traversing through the sky throughout the year. And more importantly, how those trees are going to cast shadows. Are they going to hit the home? How much? And now we can get very accurate. So if we generated an analysis and tell it, and it's showing a 8,500 kilowatt hours produced that year with a 95% annual offset, we feel very, very confident in that. And in fact, because we're utilizing this software, we actually have partnered with a company called Obnidian, and they do a cashback energy guarantee on our solar arrays. What it means to you is the solar array owner, if the system produces less than 95% of the forecasted energy, they would actually write you a check at the end of the year. And that's coming from a third party that they're so confident in the tool and the analysis that we do put together here. We would also generate a shade report. And this is going to give you an idea of how how is that tree, how are those obstructions going to affect the performance of the system that can hurt production and ultimately increase the payback period. So as you can see an example here, I did model out the neighbor home on the right-hand side. You'll see the two homes next to each other. I did that just for the sake of, didn't know until I incorporated LiDAR, was that home to the south a little bit, was it a two-story home, and we're looking at a one-story. So taking in all the considerations from the site here to really get you, an accurate analysis. It probably is not very legible on your side, but on the right-hand side, you'll see towards the bottom, it says monthly solar access across arrays. We have a couple of, we just have one group of array here, but it's showing us each month, because we have no shading or very minimal, we're at about a 99% exposure rate here. If we had trees, of course, these numbers are going to start to fluctuate in response to that. So, and the reason we are so comfortable with the analysis is we incorporate LiDAR technology. So when we go in and we start to build out your home and 3D model it out, we can use LiDAR, which if you're unfamiliar, a nice, easy way to explain it is imagine how sonar works, but we're using satellites and lasers, and we're essentially, when we bounce back and hit a signal, we know that's how tall the tree is or how tall your home is, and we can incorporate that information and start to run that analysis. And that in that GIF I showed you, where it was basically doing a model of the sun and the skies as well. So, but we can use this to tell, again, shading from trees, neighboring homes, any of those obstacles that could cause any issues with the array. And I mean, it's used for solar. I mean, they're using LiDAR to detect ancient civilizations in the Amazon rainforest. It's pretty cool what we see what they're doing. Here's a couple of LiDAR examples. So on the left-hand side is what we would call the point cloud. I personally like the point cloud. It just resonates, and it clicks with me. The mesh style is also on the right-hand side, just to kind of give you an idea of the look and feels there. I do like the mesh style more for when we're incorporating, looking at trees or woods. It really kind of gives you a better idea of, what's the shape of these trees and what's that look like. So this is where the accuracy really comes into play and the rubber meets the road. So what this means to you, accuracy. Again, it's at the forefront of everything we do here, is making sure that you have an accurate analysis. I mean, I'm sure you've all done your plenty of research in solar, and I'm sure you've come across stories in the past of, hey, I was told by the installer I was going to get an 80% electrical offset, and I'm getting 40%. those stories really, I hate to see those because we're a growing industry. There's a lot of honest installers out there, but of course we're going to see certain individuals want to take advantage of. But the takeaway here is that we want this system to meet or exceed your expectations. So the accuracy is really a key component behind that. And again, that allows us to offer the Omnidian cashback energy guarantee on the array. What this solar analysis, this virtual meeting at the kitchen table, we can save time. We don't have to drive time and hitting traffic and all the accompanying headaches that can come along with that. It's better for the environment. We're able to meet virtually. We're not having the emissions from the vehicles. I haven't made my jump to the electric vehicle yet. That is on the to-do list here. And again, we can sit at the table or sit at your kitchen table virtually. So that is what I have prepared for you guys. I know I moved kind of quick. I get a little excited. So I know, John, we're going to open this up to questions. So please, if I have not addressed or if there's been a stone left unturned, please let me know.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Dan, that was great. And now, anybody who has a question, probably the best way to deal with this is, down in reactions, you can hit a button which basically raises your hand. So it'll make sure that I can see it. So who's got the first question? Okay, Clayton, go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation, Dan. Dan, I have a few questions. How does the cost of the microinverter compare with the cost of string inverters? They normally appear to be more expensive.
Correct. Yes. We do see some disparity between the pricing. Most certainly going to depend on the inverter manufacturer. The end phase we're now starting to see is starting to become a little bit more comparable because, for example, a solar edge system with a single phase inverter is now accompanied with those power optimizers to kind of combat some of the shading. So that way, a couple of panels or modules that are shaded could bring down performance of the entire system. So with the power optimizers, we have more components, more equipment. So we are starting to see that the price comparison is starting, that gap is starting to shorten there most certainly. And one thing I do like about the microinverters solution is they are warranted from the manufacturer at 25 years. A lot of other inverter manufacturers start at 12 years, and oftentimes you can upgrade it to a 25-year warranty, but there's often a cost associated with it from the manufacturer.
Okay, I have two other quick questions. One, how does Enphase handle heat? Because here you have your your inverter sitting on your roof. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two is, you mentioned clipping with the string inverters. Mm-hmm. Do you have a clipping issue with the microinverter?
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to say the first part of the question again, just to make sure I address it.
The first question is, how does Enphase handle heating? Mm-hmm. You have the inverter sitting on a hot roof.
Absolutely. So what we do is we actually mount it with an iron ridge railing or racking that allows some space between the roof and the actual modules itself. So that way, kind of like how we saw with the in-charge batteries, we can have some of that passive cooling, because as you're absolutely right, as heat, we're going to see inefficiencies. And then also with the DC to AC conversion, when we send AC down versus DC, it is a little bit more efficient. And typically, if we're going to send it long distances with heat and voltage drop, what we would look at, if it's going to be a long distance, up the voltage and down the current.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Thanks, John. And
we're not hearing you, John.
At the beginning of your talk, you went over 3 different modes of. Okay, let me try again. For your
try again.
Or optimizations for the use of the battery. Still not working? Can you hear me?
No, it's okay now.
Okay now. Okay. I'm sorry. I improved my internet connection some months ago, but it's still not good enough. You described 3 different modes of operation for the batteries.
Mhm.
And the middle one was some sort of storm warning mode. I don't remember the words you used exactly. Could you describe that in more detail? What does it do for you?
Absolutely. Let me pull this up here. All right. So essentially the different modes that you have. So, for example, savings mode, you're going to use your stored electricity when the rates are highest. This is going to be most applicable for the time of use rates. When we have that extended or heightened rate. So they would actually be able to use the battery to kind of feed that load a little bit. So we're reducing the potential supplemental electricity draw from the grid while we're experiencing those increased rates. The self-consumption mode is basically hey, I'm trying to maximize that excess generation. So an example would be, the sun rises, any excess generation first and foremost gets stored into the battery, because we know in today's day and age, we're on a distributed generation or modified net metering, meaning we're purchasing at resale rates, but we're outflowing at wholesale rates. So customers choose to, first and foremost, store it in your battery there. And then when the time comes in the evening, for example, I can choose to draw off the battery to whatever, maybe it's a 50% depletion. And then you can have it turned back over to the grid at that point. And what we've done is we've reduced the supplemental electricity draw even further with DT and consumers, and trying to mitigate that remaining bill left over. And then the full backup mode, this is going to be more for like the storm watches and in preparation of, we might have a potentially long-term grid outage that we need to get into that little microgrids, essentially, is what we're looking to achieve here.
So about the storm watch mode, why not just let the power failure occur and then kick over and start delivering power locally? What's it doing in addition to that?
Absolutely. So one thing it's also doing is, in a sense, in addition to kind of priming for those long-term solutions being off-grid or the storm, what it's also doing is it's monitoring local weather. And what's nice is if, when the storm passes and we're out of that, the eye of the storm, so to speak, it will kick back into a normal mode or whatever you would like that to be set to. So it has a little bit of smart functionalities kind of built into it.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to find out is, what's that doing for me if I install that? I have a battery backup in my solar installation.
Mm-hmm.
And when the power fails, it in less than one power cycle, it switches over to delivering power from the batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And when the power is restored, the grid power is restored, I think it waits 5 minutes to make sure that it's really stable, and then it switches back to the grid. Mm-hmm. So what do you do more than that?
What I will do is if you'd like, if you send me an email, I'll get you some further information that'll be a little bit more detailed from Enphase as to, hey, here's what these different modes do, just so I don't misspeak or leave out anything that tool or that backup mode has its capability. So if you don't mind, could you send me an email and I can get you some further literature or information?
Yeah, John, could you put his email address in the chat, or because I didn't catch it at the beginning?
Here, I'll leave it up here for you too. So
sure. If I could just interject a little bit, one extra thing that that Stormwatch is going to do for you is allow your battery to not discharge as the storm's approaching, so you can have a maximum amount of power in your battery at the time of an outage if it were to occur, versus if your solar array is not keeping up with what your production is, instead of running with what your consumption is currently, instead of using the battery to run the home, it still keeps the battery charged so that you're not using it in a non-outage situation.
Perfect. Thank you, Ray.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Anybody have some additional questions? Wayne, I think you had a bunch of questions in the chat.
I was just checking that out.
Yeah.
Looks like, all right.
Yeah, well, one or two of them got answered. Apparently, this system only works with in-phase PV array. So if you've got something else, you're out of luck with that. What else did I put in here? Well, when you have several microinverters on your battery,
Mhm.
does it have an effect on maximum draw? Or do they all work together seamlessly in such a way that they're cumulative?
Yeah, they work together seamlessly. The only time you would see any, difference would be is if one of those microinverters fails. Again, it's going to be at the rate at which you can draw if a battery is going to be affected, but you still would be able to
Mhm.
draw off that battery at that time. So essentially, if you have the 4 microinverters, well, now we're down to 3. We're just going to be able to, it's just going to lessen that outflow some because of one of the microinverters is down.
I'm certainly glad to see them using lithium iron phosphate, which is a much more stable battery than the Tesla batteries. And it's the battery that I say you can throw down the basement stairs and it's not going to catch your house on
Exactly.
fire.
Because I've seen a lot of videos, where people, especially in, warmer climates, where they often put in batteries or garages. And we're seeing a lot of times as cars, as they get parked in the garage, oops, gone a little too far. So yes, you're right. Not that we want to be throwing this down the stairs or puncturing it, but you most certainly could, and it would alleviate a lot of those fears or concerns.
Okay, go ahead, Clayton.
And since you're not moving it anywhere, its power density and its weight doesn't really make a difference. So go ahead.
Yeah, okay, I asked a question about clipping. Is the
yes.
clipping with the microinverter?
So I would say, clipping is not going to be as large a concern because we have them properly sized to the module, a microinverter. Where in regards to when you have a single phase solution, we start to run into number of modules exceeding the DC to AC conversion rate. And then if it can't, if we have too much on the DC side and it can't convert it over to AC, we're going to kind of see, the clipping. So imagine kind of like a hill and just chopping off the top bit. And that's essentially what's going to cause that clipping is too much DC to AC. So the microinverters are kind of, like I said, they're individualized and they're properly sized to really combat any clipping, or at least as much as you would see on a single phase where we're getting to too many panels on our system.
So is the inverter size based on the watt size of the panel?
Depends on the panel and electrical setup. Like, an IQ7A, which is a microinverter model, is going to be more for like your 400 watt modules and a little bit larger. The IQ7 Plus is going to work with like your 3-phase setups. It would be more for like your commercial projects. So different panels and different like variables go into consideration as to pairing it with the right panel. But the idea here is that we don't run in a situation where we're kind of bringing them all into a string, and if we have too much DC, then that's where we start to clip on the AC production.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions? Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Well, I can ask another question.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Have you ever installed a big system that is capable of handling the startup loads for something like my geothermal heating system for my house?
I have not personally. I'm not sure if any of my counterparts on my team would most certainly be a large draw that we'd be putting on. So it would definitely take a lot of battery backup solution to do that, but we would have to definitely explore to see what kind of size. But I'm not sure. I haven't personally dealt with any systems to be of a geothermal size. I can most certainly investigate that and inquire on my counterparts to see if anybody has any experience.
When you're building a bigger system, do you just add more panels and microinverters and more batteries? Can you just put them all more and more and more of them in parallel and to an unlimited level, or is there a limit somewhere?
Essentially you're going to run into, there's going to be limits from a utility company standpoint. I know with like in the commercial arena, once you get to 150 kW DC size system, you're no longer allowed to outflow electricity to the utility company. So there most certainly be some size restrictions. In respect to the residential side, I'm not sure if there's a max size that you can or cannot do. I'm working on some very large systems right now for residential that you would think they were commercial projects. So we're definitely starting to see, because previously with net metering, you had category 1 and you had category 2, and category 2 was anything in excess of 20 kW size system. Before that, we weren't seeing systems, a lot of residential systems at the 20 kW or larger, because when you got into that category 2, you got into what is now distributed generation, where you pay retail rates and you outflow wholesale rates. So because of that, we weren't doing large systems in the past, but now with DT's new distributed generation, we're now seeing installations go bigger than that 20 kW, because you're not losing out on that net metering like we were previously. So my guess is, John, we're probably going to start seeing bigger systems like that start to come into play.
Well, I was not thinking about the utilities rules. I was just thinking about electrical limits. If I were to build an off-grid system, could I do it just by adding more batteries and more panels, or would you have to change technology at some point?
So, I mean, are you saying when you say change the technology at some point, just to keep the off-grid solution? Or are you referring to, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I mean, stop using Enphase and install some other manufacturer, or install a different kind of battery.
I see. Yeah, no, the Enphase is going to be, it's warranted longer than most manufacturers on the inverters and on the batteries. So I would say that the Enphase is a pretty solid solution, even if you were starting to look at some off-grid solutions.
I think Tom had a question. Did you have a question, Tom?
Yeah, I think it was answered before, but I just want to be sure. Can you add your battery system to an existing installation from a different manufacturer?
Unfortunately, the Encharge batteries are only working with the Enphase microinverters right now.
Okay.
I don't know if they have any plans to change that, but currently it's just in connection with their Enphase microinverter.
Okay, thank you.
And Wayne, did you have another question?
Well, I'm a little bit confused here about your comments about clipping. And clipping is set up so that the system actually picks up more in the early morning and in the late afternoon. It turns on earlier, and it compensates for what it's being clipped off on, a couple of days during the summer when you're actually maxing out because of the location of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So the question really is, does the microinverter, you were saying that the microinverter was going to wake up earlier, and it's a little hard for me to understand that it's going to do both. But I don't know the inside of the electronics of the microinverter, but clipping is really done so that, and I've seen it on my system. My system clips, but it only clips, I don't know, a half a dozen times a year or a dozen times a year in the summer when the sun is optimal, a full clear day at the right time of day and everything. And it picks up, I mean, my system turns on at 7 o'clock in the morning in the summertime, sometimes not putting out a lot, but it picks up, I'm sure it picks up more that way than not. So what does the microinverter do? And I've seen in the past, I saw somebody who was upset because somebody had put a system in where the microinverter was sized to only produce about 70% of the panel, and I wasn't sure whether that was actually to do clipping or whether it was just that Enphase was behind the curve and the panels got too big and somebody installed an inverter that was too small for the panel.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe there was an improperly sized inverter there is most likely what happened. And especially since now that we're starting to see panel wattage go up. We're starting to see the modules are getting bigger, 320s, now it's 370s. We're seeing 400s and 405s hit the market. So as subsequent, we need to make sure the inverters are sized appropriately. Absolutely.
I think to answer a little bit, the clipping, you would still experience some of the clipping on certain days, just like you're talking about 6 to 10 days a year, depending on how your system is oriented. But at the end of the day, that burst mode is to not really designed to control the clipping, but like you were saying, wake up the panel earlier and let it stay up later. And
Yes.
I'm not an engineer by any means, but I believe the way it works is kind of like off of a little capacitor in there that allows it to store some subsequent charge, so it doesn't need the full power startup power to turn on. So that's how burst mode kind of works. But we could get you, I'm sure, a video YouTube link or something like that could give a much better in detail description than what I can.
Yeah, it's more designed for, like I said, those low light conditions for early morning, early evening, cloud coverage, things of that nature.
Great, thank you.
Am I right in assuming, Dan or Ray, that that burst mode is true for any of the Enphase microinverters, right? That's a feature for all of them?
IQ7 line. So as long as it's the new IQ7 line, if it was an
Yeah,
older
IQ.
Enphase microinverter technology, then it would not have had that.
Oh, okay. So, and how new is that, Ray?
IQ7s have come out in the last couple of years, and they're right now working on their IQ8 line, which is essentially the same microinverter that they have in the N-Charge battery units, but they have a different version for the battery than what they will be deploying on the roof. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was this fall, I want to say they're coming out with those, the new IQ8s. It's either this fall or sometime next year. I can't remember exactly the release date, but they're working on that as well.
Okay, thanks. Janet, go ahead. Janet, did you have a question?
There we go. You mentioned that they had a very low failure rate, only 1 in 3,000.
Mhm.
What about over the 25 years? How does the failure rate of the IQ7s over years compare with the earlier versions of the microinverters?
Absolutely. Ray, can you speak to the failure rate from the older versions to the newer ones? I'm not sure of like data on that I
Yeah,
can compare offhand.
yeah. I don't have the exact data for you, but I know early on in our career here at Michigan Solar Solutions, we did install the Enphase product back then, and did see some issues with it. Since then, many generations have been iterated, and this is definitely a much lower failure rate, as well as the accelerated testing that they've done on the lab on all these products now over time. So it definitely has been very good for us. And the customer service of Enphase really has been outstanding that we've noticed. So even if you do have a failure event, I suspect it's much more friendly to have than if you have one with another inverter manufacturer that we typically see.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you don't have one point of failure. Like if a regular string inverter fails, then your whole system's down. Whereas if one microinverter out of 25 or something fails, only 1/25 is lost until it's replaced. But on the other hand, they're up there on the roof, and if one broke this year and one broke next year and one broke the year after that, you'd have to have a person climb up on the roof each time to fix it. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, you would have to have someone come out. Now, the microinverter solution, they have an interesting component with their warranty. So it's 25-year parts and performance. And then they do it's like a 3-year labor warranty, because what they found in this, million-hour testing each year for each product line, they found that if the microinverter is going to fail, it's either going to fail in that first 3-year window, or it's going to fail the 25 to 30 plus years out from now. So it's either going to fail in the beginning, or it's going to fail at the end of its life like it would normally. So they do have a labor component on the first 3 years, knowing that if it's going to fail, it's most likely going to happen at that point. So they do cover a labor side in respect that they knew that in response that if it's going to fail, we know that it's on the roof and they're going to have to pull a panel, etc. So they do account for that with a labor warranty.
Well, that's good to know. Good to know what the labor is covered for the first 3 years at least. That's good to know.
Exactly.
Any other questions before we, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have sun power panels installed in 2019. I see that Enphase bought SunPower's microinverter business in 2018. Do we have Enphase microinverters?
That's an excellent question. You know what? Could you send me an email and I can get you some information as to, hey, here's how you'd be able to tell what system. And most importantly, we need to know what, if you do have an Enphase system, what model number, just so that way, if you would like to retrofit batteries in with it, we need to know what model, just in case there's any retrofitting of additional equipment we would need to do to add the battery into the system.
Okay, I'll see what I can dig up and email you.
Yeah, and if you want, send me an email and I can send over just some detailed, hey, here's how you can quickly access information to verify if you're you're able to have the Encharge system.
Well, you can't exactly see the microinverters unless you get up and get underneath the panel, right?
Yeah, but there will be some ways, I can send over some information on how you can dig up some of that information, because I've helped some customers who do have microinverters, even if it's the Enphase, but they need to verify some equipment just to make sure. Again, do we need to retrofit additional equipment to make it happen? So I can send you over that information of, hey, here's what to look for, and we can kind of determine. Now, do you have any type of like consumption monitoring or any way to monitor the production of your system?
Yeah, we have the SunPower's monitoring whatever they have.
Okay, there may be some information in there. I haven't personally dived into SunPower's monitoring system, but most likely I imagine there's probably information on what inverters you have, as well as the panels. They should have some information in there. And I'm happy to jump on like a Zoom or something and we can explore it together if you need some assistance.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And probably a lot of you noticed Dan did put his email address in the chat box. So if you want to communicate with him further, you want to grab that quick because we're getting close to 8 o'clock. Any further comments or questions from anybody? Okay, well, Dan, thank you very much. This has been very informative, and we appreciate you taking the time. And I bet you're going to get some questions via email.
All right.
Yeah, that's you don't mind. I know that's just part of the service. So yeah, again, thank you everybody for participating. We'll be back next Thursday with the Clean Energy Seminar, and I appreciate you taking the time to participate in this. And with that, I guess I'll sign off and say bye-bye to everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.